Welcome back to Credit Lens, Europe and Beyond. I'm Phoebe Appenteng.
And I am Katie McMahon.
Coming up today is a British institution that's been making pottery since the time of Napoleon, and it's finally run out of road. We're looking at the collapse of Denby pottery, what killed the 217-year-old brand, and what the sell process looks like, and what it tells us about Made in Britain in 2026.
That's right. And then we will move on to something a little bit different. You'll see I'm not in the studio with Phoebe in person today. I am dialing in from Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where I've been taking the pulse of the market here in the wake of the US announcement of what appears to be a deal to end or at least pause the war in Iran. So Phoebe, I'll let you in on a little bit of how investors and advisors are reading the situation and the markets in the GCC today.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it. But before any of that, a reminder that this podcast is for information purposes only. These are our personal views, not those of Octus or any affiliated organisation. And this is not investment advice. Stop investing on my advice.
Right, so we will end up in Dubai, but let's start in Derbyshire.
Denby pottery, 217 years old, and that's 217 years of history gone. It was born in 1809, and last week the last piece of stoneware went into the kiln at the Derbyshire site, with workers lining up to clap through one for the last time, I guess. It has become a massive talking point. It's triggered a lot of political debate over the decline of Made in Britain, or decline of UK manufacture. And I can already hear the "we no longer produce anything" brigade, like, in my mind going on. But, setting all that emotion aside, let's dive into what actually happened here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company filed a notice to appoint administrators back in March, and they said that they were facing soaring costs and low consumer confidence. So FRP Advisory were brought in, I believe, as joint administrators, and pretty quickly the picture became clear that a full rescue was not on the cards. So the primary financial backer here is a firm called Valco Capital Partners. Yeah. That's in turn the private equity arm of a turnaround specialist, HILCO. Mm-hmm. And Valco was pushing in this case for an accelerated asset sale rather than a turnaround or a rescue of the business. So fire sale, basically.
And what's interesting is that Valco is also not just a sponsor, it's also like a major secured creditor. So it's got exposure to both the equity and the debt side. So it's definitely taken a double hit in the waterfall, for sure. In fact, yeah. Valco also backed a management buyout that saved Denby from collapsing in 2009. So it feels like maybe this was always on the cards. And when they backed them in 2009, they wrote off more than half of like a 72 million debt burden at the time. And they also provided essential working capital that kept the lights on and the kilns being fired, and it kept the business alive for more than a decade.
Yeah, so this is not one of those kind of sudden decline stories that we sometimes see. I guess this has been going on for the best part of nearly 2 decades at this point. Yeah. So a really slow sort of descent.
Slow burn.
It's a slow firing kiln. I don't feel good making puns about our local British pottery industry.
Oh, thank you. You're patriotic now. Hello.
I do think it's sad, and I know that we have got some fans in the studio, producer Charlie among them, of Denby. But I do think it's sad that to see Denby pottery close its doors after such a long history, as you say, and we do have a big tradition of pottery in this country, and actually lots of artisanal crafts and businesses that sadly cannot compete in the current climate. And now 17 years later, they hold secondary charges securing outstanding debts of over 32 million. The Valco, this is, across 2 entities. So you've got Valco GP4, Valco Capital Partners, Secure Trust Bank is in there sitting ahead. That's a first ranking debenture. Secure Trust is owed about £1.3 million, I believe. Administrators expecting that one actually to be repaid in full. I think that unsecured trade creditors are owed about £1.67 million, and administrators are explicit that they don't expect any of that to get repaid.
So basically, suppliers, trade creditors are basically looking to be wiped out. Thank you so much for going over the basics of the waterfall. Should we kind of peel back in terms of the macro stuff, what happened, how many jobs are going to be affected, what the interwebs have been saying about this company?
Yeah, so not a huge, ginormous business, but it is sizable. We've got about 500 jobs there that have been put at risk now that the administrators have come in. Manufacturing halted in April. That triggered immediately about 130 redundancies. And apparently right now the company's retained just 22 employees.
I don't know if you remember the global financial crisis, but I think I just about finished university and I just remember getting jobs. I went to 12 interviews. Oh God, it sort of feels like we're in that space, even though the credit markets don't reflect that, the equity markets don't reflect that. Anyway, but there's been a lot of noise on social media blaming the Labour government. However, obviously, as we've said, it's way before this current Labour government came into power. Lord Frost, for example, argued that the business was killed by this government, pointing to net zero policies, Ed Miliband coming up, and rise in employment costs. And I guess to what extent is that fair? They did come in, had high taxes, I think increased the minimum wage, national insurance contributions. They clearly don't help manufacturing. But is this really a policy story, or is it more like a weak consumer demand, broader structural pressures facing UK manufacturing?
I mean, far be it from me to come in the defence of Keir Starmer. It will be a first on this podcast. Or elsewhere. But this one seems a little bit of an unfair charge to me. I mean, obviously the Labour government's been left holding the baby, but I think that you can pretty clearly trace this back to, as you say, decades long erosion of margins in a business where we're flooded with cheap disposable household goods, and Denby stood for something else, and that's something that they've not been able to, that's a business model that they've apparently just not been able to make fly. I do think there is something to the energy part of this. Kilns, as you might imagine, are extremely energy intensive. So Denby operated 3 large kilns. The company apparently told the BBC that its energy bill had jumped from 1.25 million before 2022 to between 2.5 and 3 million pounds.
Wow, that's almost double. I can't imagine what that does to margins if you're already on a budget.
Yeah, absolutely. It's energy costs out of control there. There is a live petition with over 100,000 signatures apparently calling for ceramics to be included in the British Industry Supercharger scheme. And if you hadn't heard of that before, it gives certain industries discounted electricity. So that's going to be debated in Parliament.
But I take it this debate won't come in time to actually save Denby.
Yeah, and I mean, Denby's been loss-making, and not to stress the point, but in 11 of the last 15 years, revenue had fallen over the course of the past few years. It dropped from 45 million in 2024, having already, been decreasing since 2017. From 2024, when it was 45.4 million, it dropped all the way down to 18.6 million.
That's quite a steep dive.
It is, and total liabilities were around 36 million pounds at the end of 24, against just 197,000 pounds in cash. So, this obviously energy bills rising haven't helped this, but I think it's fair to say they've just really accelerated a decline that was already well underway. Yeah.
So this sounds like a classic consumer story, challenging one, though the recent Labour net and net zero policies haven't helped for sure. Homewares are also discretionary income, fair enough. I'm not going to spend 150 quid on a 12-piece dinner piece. I can just go to IKEA. Or I can just buy 1 or 2 because my household is 2. So I don't need 12. And, when you're competing with Made in China, for instance, I think you can get a comparable 12-piece dinner set at John Lewis for 55 quid. And I think Denby's was costing 264. So...
Yeah, I'll hold my hands up and say, as much as I love the idea of us having local ceramics manufacturers in the UK and continuing that history, my dinner set is from John Lewis. So, I'm part of the problem.
Oh, hello. Part of the middle class, rara.
I've got a John Lewis dinner set, actually. I just need everyone to know.
Denby's is not Wedgwood or a Royal Dalton, with the Jasper Imperial pieces. So Denby's was supposed to be for middle working class people, but clearly it's still out of reach for most of us. Anyway, take us to the sale process when it was taken into administration. Is it likely to be a piecemeal sale? Because the administrators haven't really come up with anything, nor have they given up yet, right?
Yeah, so apparently FRP has announced that they've received 12 offers for various parts of the business and its assets. So the corporate finance team approached 48 parties at the outset, gave 42 of them access to a data room. So there has been a fair bit of market interest in this, and perhaps among the most prominent bidders, the ones you might recognise, Home Bargains, the discount retailer owned by TJ Morris, is apparently been reported as one of the bidders for the name and the assets.
I guess this kind of tells you something about where the Bright might end up. I do like the Home Bargains. My mum and I used to, spend our Saturdays finding bargains there.
Yeah, nothing at all against Home Bargains. I mean, as mentioned, I'm a John Lewis girl. But yeah, it's not what you might call a prestige outcome for, as we've said, a British manufacturer with that storied history. I'm really sounding like a complete snob against Home Bargains right now.
Home Bargains, it is what it is. Everyone, I think, shops for things that they can get exactly the same brand, but for like lower cost somewhere. So I think that's where Home Bargains sits.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, we will be watching that one closely, and you can find all of the Octus coverage on the proposals notice analysis, the Home Bargains intel, and more on our platform as per usual. Shall we move on to a bit of UAE and me?
Why not? So, Katie, you've been in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Every time I think of Abu Dhabi, I just want to say dabba dabba doo. How are people in the distressed and restructuring side of the market thinking about this new apparent peace deal between US and Iran? What does it mean for the businesses and outlook? Potentially.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I have been in Dubai for the past couple of days. I'm in Abu Dhabi for the next couple of days, meeting with investors, advisors, lawyers, people who know what's going on inside of the distressed and restructuring space in the UAE. As far as this peace deal goes, I would say people are hopeful and skeptical all at once, probably like the rest of the world.
Hopeful in what sense?
Hopeful that it's going to stick, skeptical that it won't. So, I mean, I think that we all have come to learn that there is sometimes a gap between what is announced by the US and President Trump and what is announced by other parties to the deal, what really happens on the ground. There's a few key things that people, I think, are looking for. One is in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, just how quickly it can reopen, and to see a material amount of shipping come through the strait without issue will be, I think, a key tick box.
Yeah.
And we had, I think, one of the major shipping companies come out this morning and use actually exactly that phrasing, that it wanted to see a material change in what was going on with the shipping flows through Hormuz. So that's a key element, especially when it comes to talking about the UAE. And if you want to hone in a little bit more closely on Dubai, also to Abu Dhabi to some extent, but Dubai really is the city that runs in a big part on tourism. And until certain things happen, like the Foreign Office changing its travel advice to the UAE, which is currently, I believe, only necessary travel is currently advised to the UAE. That means a lot of people cannot get insurance if they want to come here on holiday. So that has obviously a huge knock-on effect for the tourism industry here. In my small sample of hotels that I have been staying at in Dubai and Abu Dhabi this week, is pretty quiet.
Is it pretty quiet? Oh,
It's
but there
absolutely
might be like deals on. You remember COVID? We had like get out to like kind of support restaurants. There must be like loads of like policies like encouraging people to go out to boost businesses.
100%. There is so much going on. UAE definitely has its own version of help out to eat out there. Every single hotel here is doing staycation packages. You'll see a lot of people who live here bringing their families for the weekend. The point was also made at the conference that I am currently attending this morning by a bank economist at one of the UAE's major banks. He pointed out that quiet period anyway for UAE hotels and hospitality is from May to September. So that quiet period may have come a little bit earlier in the year, obviously since the conflict kicked off, but there is, I think, generally speaking, a kind of wait and see attitude in the market right now, where people want to see the hotels do their renovations, do these staycation packages, tide themselves over through into September. And that's when I think people will really want to start looking at some hard data and see, is there stress emerging in this market, or are you actually starting to see the green shoots of recovery?
Mm-hmm. So I think we talked a couple of months back when the conflict started about some of the Dubai real estate names. It's a great segue into that, coming under pressure. How is the real estate market looking there?
Yes, so you might remember we talked about those public listed sukuk that are on the market for some of the Dubai real estate developers, Bengati, Omniyet, Shubha, and the rest.
I do
Those have all bounced back in great part. I mean, I think you see a lot of them trading in the 90s, if not above par, even in some cases. I do think that, much like in the hospitality sector, restructuring advisors and lawyers are keeping a pretty close eye on those names. They are looking to see, although Q1 earnings obviously weren't particularly impacted, they'll now be looking for Q2 earnings to see what shows up in those in terms of how that period from April to now has been. And the really interesting thing that people are looking for is, I don't know if you remember, we talked about how a lot of these Dubai developers operate on off-plan basis, so they're selling apartments before the developments are actually built.
Yeah.
The question now that a lot of people have is, for those who maybe put down a 10% or a 20% on an apartment that's not built yet, if they see prices coming down in the secondary market, there may be a tipping point where it makes more economic sense for me to walk away from my 10-20% deposit and take that as a loss than to continue paying down. Say I'm going to be paying 10 million dirhams on a property that's now worth... Yeah, five would be extreme, but exactly. So at some point that will no longer make economic sense for people. And then you may see kind of a wave of defaults on some of those off-plan properties. I think that the market is pretty split on what that speculatively would lead to. There are some rumblings of some consolidation in the UAE real estate market. So where you might see some of these bigger, more established, more well-financed and well-backed and well-connected players like your EMEA properties, you could see some of those guys come in and buy up smaller players.
Fair enough.
On the other hand, you could see consolidation within the companies themselves. So maybe fewer projects being made, maybe people who have deposits down on the projects that they do have being moved and switched into projects that are already further along on the construction timeline. That's the view of a couple people that I've talked to in the market who follow these things pretty closely. So that's all to be seen. Important inflection point will be September again, because you'll see if expats who left during the height of the conflict are putting their kids back in the schools for the start of the autumn term. Exactly.
And in terms of big corporate restructuring stories, you've got your ear to the ground there in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. What are some of the names everyone's talking about?
Yeah, I think in terms of the names that everyone's talking about, there is really only one name in the UAE restructuring market right now, and that is IFCO. So IFCO is a large food and beverage conglomerate. They run some relatively well-known brands: London Dairy ice cream, Tiffany biscuits, Noor cooking oils. It's an edible oils business in part, and it's also a fast-moving consumer goods business in part. And they have run into some trouble. You're looking at about $2 billion in the debt stack. So creditors, actually led by HSBC, have filed for insolvency proceedings in that case in both the Isle of Man and in Singapore. And in tandem with those insolvency proceedings, there's also some negotiations going on, hoping to come to a consensual restructuring. HSBC is the biggest creditor here, and their exposure, we reported at about $500 million back in December. Pretty significant. They're the biggest creditor of the bunch here. Bloomberg reporting also in the last week or two that the exposure there is about $400 million at this point. So maybe there's been a little bit of a sell down there. But regardless, HSBC certainly doesn't want to be left holding the bag for this one, and they are leading the litigation in court to be seen if they will also be able to come to some accommodation with the company outside of court.
Is there some kind of turnaround story here, or is it also just like Denby, another case of consumer decline in purchasing some of their goods? And
yeah, interesting thing about IFCO is that most people feel that the value of the company is really in the brands that it has. And in order to maintain the value in the brands, you need to obviously keep the business running and operating. On the company side, they would contend that the business has continued to operate throughout. They'll be fighting the appointment of provisional liquidators, at least in the Isle of Man, because it's their contention that the current management are the best people to keep running the business while they pursue a turnaround. So that turnaround could look something like making some kind of an agreement with the creditors on how this debt repays, while you also do a bit of orderly disposal of the assets. Even on the creditor side, I don't think that there's appetite here for an immediate winding up of the business. And that's quite an interesting legal point that our legal analyst Connor Lovell is covering along with myself for the Isle of Man proceedings. The Isle of Man insolvency law is from, I believe, 1936.
Oh, wow.
And has not been updated since. So there's really no provision in Isle of Man legislation to do something like you would do in the UK, an administration where administrators come in and take over and continue to run the business while an orderly asset disposal or winding up takes place. There's really only provision in Isle of Man for an immediate winding up.
I was going to say, it sounds like some kind of tactical forum shopping then for the whoever put it in liquidation.
Well, this is an Isle of Man registered company. I mean, IFCO is a global operation, it should be said.
Yeah, it could have filed anywhere technically, right? Like 2.5 billion. I'm assuming it's got some kind of sizable revenue to go with that cap stack. It could have kind of filed strategically anywhere. So who filed it? Was it IFCO or the creditors?
So creditors filed in this case.
Ah, okay.
And what the creditors are really trying to do is something that's not been seen in the Isle of Man before, which is to have a winding up of the company granted while also having a stay to the winding up, which gives you that space in between where the joint provisional liquidators would come in and effectively run the business for that time.
I think it's time to wrap up.
Let's wrap it up. But first, should we play a game?
As usual.
All right, so before we sign off, let's play another little game. This one is Guess the Primary Deal.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, well, we'll read the clues. You see if you can name the borrower before we do, and you get 3 clues. They increase in specificity.
Okay, so I'm going to go first. I'm going to give you the clues, and you're going to be the one guessing.
All
yeah?
right. Let's
so
do
clue
it.
1. This company is a German company, and it's in the business of keeping people safe. Think eye protection, helmets, that kind of thing.
Okay. Can I get a second clue increased in specificity?
Oh, come on, ask me a question.
Okay, German. You said eye protection. Okay.
Yeah.
What does the capital structure look like?
I don't know the capital structure.
What does the debt look like then?
I'll give you one clue. Its name
okay.
is also a German word for over or above. And I know that you studied German, so.
Uber.
Close. Above.
Uber. Okay. Uvex. Winter Holding is the sports eyewear group, right?
Yeah. So it's in the market with about 450 million, most likely TLB. I don't recall seeing it in the public side, so I'm going to assume it's a TLB.
Nice.
Okay, so yeah, it's Uvex Winter Holding.
Uvex does not mean over or above, but I'll let that
It doesn't
one
mean over and
slide.
above. We're going to blame the producer for this one. Just going to take one on.
All right, give me one more. Hopefully I can regain my pride.
Okay, this one is famous. It's a European footwear brand that's become something of a cultural phenomenon. 1, clue, start thinking fashion, leisure. Another clue, it's that it's like famous for its 2-strap cork footbed sandals and slippers.
Okay, I know this one.
You knew immediately.
This is Birkenstock.
Yeah, it is. It's also German. It's listed.
Yeah.
And I think it came this week to raise a 900 million senior unsecured note to refi existing debt.
There you go, an uptick in the primary market.
That's really, I know, it's been really, really busy. I think the analysts have been doing a lot of like analysis on the bond side. A few bonds also came to market.
Yeah, markets just revved up and kicked right back into gear as if nothing ever happened, I guess.
And on that note, a big thank you to Fawaz for keeping us on track, and to you for listening. Denby, Mina, and a cork footbed. Not a combination we'd predicted for this episode, but here we are.
Yeah, thanks for letting me dial in from afar, and I'll be back in the studio with you in 2 weeks' time.
Exactly. See you in 2 weeks, and all the best.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.